this is why there's healers like us here to help as a guide, to support them through that process, because it is scary. Like, I'm sure, Toni, when you were remembering the abuse you went through, that was probably terrifying for you, right?
Well, exactly. You know, it's funny because at the beginning I knew something had happened because I saw how shut off and numb I was. Yeah, I remember some of the first sessions when in Rubenfeld Synergy, one of the ways that we first start a session is perhaps touching the arm or the hip or the leg and saying, what are you experiencing here? And all over my body was like a thin layer of rock. And underneath was nothing, empty, nothing. And I was like, wow, there's nothing in there, you know, and I'm rock. What happened? And then as I actually started to have memories, I would talk about it as if it was somebody else. You know, I was very not feeling it. And my synergist really had to help me, okay, you know, like, listen to what you're saying. What if this was somebody else? What would you feel? I say, well, I would feel bad for them. Well, and it was you, you know, so, and I really had to be taught to feel my feelings. I had numbed so much to myself, and what was more important was what other people were feeling, and really learning. And, you know, there's that quote in my book. I quote one of my teachers of the Donald Epstein of the network spinal analysis. He said, we need to learn to listen to our body's whispers so we don't have to endure its screams. And, you know, even when the body's screaming, it's not trying to hurt you. It's trying to get your attention. And sometimes, you know, it has to scream so that we'll slow down enough to say, gee, maybe I need some taking care of. Gee, you know, maybe this needs some attention. And it will do that. Like you're saying, it just keeps coming back around again, until finally, you know, sometimes people come into the office, it's funny, and they'll have something like, let's say, you know, their leg is totally numb and the muscle doesn't work. They can't lift up their leg, you know, they're dragging their leg. And I'll say, well, gee, when did this start? Well, it started about 40 years ago, but, you know, it just used to hurt a little bit. You know?
Yeah. And you're like, whoa, you've really not been listening for a long time.
It's like, okay, so this is not, you know, this is something that needs some attention, and not just a little Band-Aid. You know, this is now you've been not listening for a really long time. We need to totally revamp your way of taking care of yourself. This is totally now. We have to pay attention.
Yes.
So.
Yes. And I love like the way, you know, you were describing in your book of just like what had you so driven. We were kind of talking before the show about that. And I could relate to that in some levels as well in my life, like where you feel from very young, like I remember as I was doing my inner child healing and my work, I could remember like being around age 3, 4, where it was like I was suddenly the caregiver and I was the responsible one. I was the one taking care of my brother. I was the one taking care of wounded mother. And it was just like this numbness that I discovered in myself, that from that age, it was all about how do I make them happy? How do I be a good girl? I need to be a good girl. And when I really processed that, like there was some painful emotions I had to remember of sitting outside my mother's bathroom door and her saying she's going to kill herself and that it was all my fault. And she had been abusing me and she felt so terrible that she, you know, hated herself. And I realized even as a young child, which I say this is partly what I think's kept me sane and still powerful in my life, is that there was this just innate connection I had to angels and to spirit, that no matter what happened with humans around me, there was such a confusion in my childhood. I remember just feeling like, where the hell am I? And like, what is this place? Because my soul it had such a memory of love and harmony and just, you know, connection. And I was in this hell that made no sense to me. And so, you know, as a healer that works with people in a very spiritual way to help them come back and honor that part of their innocence and their purity, I feel like that's something that's been really rough on a lot of us if we've been abused, because we're really taught young to ignore our own feelings, and we kind of take it on. We don't even know when. That's why I love helping people unravel that shadow aspect, is because you go back and you're, maybe you're 60 years old, but it's really your 3-year-old that is the one that needs to be honored, because that 3-year-old is exhausted and she feels like she doesn't feel free. She doesn't feel like a child. She never got to be one. And so it's so interesting how that will show up in humans' lives, don't you think?
Oh, yes, I think so. And it's amazing, too, the resilience. And it's so wonderful that you kept that connection that I feel like we all have with spirit. I believe in reincarnation. I believe that we come and go. And you kept that. You had still the memory of that connection to the astral and the angels and those other higher beings, so that could help you survive.
Yes.
Where you were, and open really your heart and mind to that aspect of living. It keeps us going, like there's something more than this. I'm in this living hell right now, but how can this change, And we are all, I do truly believe that we all have within us the resources that we need to heal, and that the challenges that we're facing, the experiences we're having in this life, are merely here to have us have the feelings, to have the epiphanies. It's like an experience to allow us to have the light bulb go off. How else are we going to learn and grow unless we have a challenge and experience that we can move through? And it can be very awful, but there is, that's our role here as healers of all the different, our animals. My goodness, what healers are they? And, they help us forward, and we have the resources. We do have the resources that no matter what has happened, we can move from whatever wounds we have in our life and move forward and garnish the gifts and the insights and bring them back to the world and give them as gifts to others, which is what you and I are doing, and many others, is really helping others by having those insights and then and bringing those gifts back to others, so they can heal.
Absolutely. And I feel like what you just said, that we have it inside of us. There has been times that I've got to give honor and credit to all the multitude of humans that have touched my life, like whether it be, animals that were just so unconditionally loving, to humans like teachers that were encouraging when parents were not, books that I've read. But when I really get to the deep part of what's helped me be strong and heal, it has been my connection with spirit. And I feel like it comes when you were talking about people saying, like, you have intuition, Toni, or Tanya, you have great intuition, but what if I don't? I'm not gifted. And I was just watching a movie. I've seen this movie so many times. I love it. And I encourage every one of you to watch it, called The Peaceful Warrior. And in that film, he's saying to the guy, he's like, how do I know that you're not just my imagination and, my intuition? And the guy's like, maybe I am. And what I love about it is that when it comes back to our connectedness and our oneness and unity consciousness, what I understand in my soul is that when Toni shows up in the movie of a human that's hurting and she's speaking wisdom, in essence, she is an aspect of self, the wise sage that just showed up to mirror to this human a direction. And so internally, yes, we have the intuition, and now we have what I call the human that comes in to bring confirmation. And so that human will confirm and mirror to us something that we already know. And so when we start to create this separation consciousness where we're like us against them, we compete, we compare, we're completely an ego identity. And that's what creates pain and suffering. So if we can see the healers of the world as aspects of self, like these are the wise sages that are showing up, they're one with us, and they've been through what we've been through, but they're not superior or higher than us any more than when we see the humans that are hurting and they're victimized and we're healers. we can see aspects of ourself in them as well that are reflecting to ourself. And sometimes, like, as you were saying, I know in my journey, there'd be times I feel like I'm so wanting to help humans and help them, and I want to help everyone. And then I would start seeing patterns like, what is going on with all these people with relationship stuff? Or like, every one of these women has been sexually abused or whatever. And I would start to get quiet and go into meditation with it. Like, Spirit, what are you saying to me? And that would be such a profound moment for my own healing and growth, because Spirit would be like, yeah, you need to remember some stuff. And we're bringing more and more of these humans to you until you can remember it, because it's time for you to clear that. It's time for you to release that cellular memory. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And I love and appreciate what you're saying so much, because I feel that it is an aspect of how we need each other, you know?
Yes.
Because sometimes people will say, well, do you work on yourself, Toni? And yeah. But I go to other people too, because what happens, it's when we meet, you know? And I try to, a couple of aspects, like you're saying, perhaps I speak some wisdom, but it's that person's soul recognition of, yes, that resonates with me, and they go take that into themselves and create, you know, that gift. It's like a flower blossoms, you know, this seed blossoms. Yeah. And I always say, you know, when I touch people, the way that I work with my hands-on work, the people will say, wow, you know, your hands, and I feel all this stuff happening under your hands. And it's funny because I can say, well, you know, to me, it feels like you, and to you, it feels like me, but it's what's happening between us. It's where it's what's happening when we meet. That's the magic, and spirit or universal intelligence, God, goddess, however you want to call. That's why we're here together, because we're here to help heal each other and reflect to each other and allow, you know, that healing to occur. Sometimes I hear myself telling something to a client, and I know it's for me. It's coming through me, but it's like, okay, Toni, that one's for you.
Oh yeah, I've had moments like that too, where you're like, whoa, that's really giving me prickles, and that is very important for myself. Yes, absolutely. Well, it's interesting. I had a session the other day with a friend. She's the new friend I just met at a yoga studio I teach at, and she's a healer. And so we decided to do healing for each other. And like, I just felt guided to her, and it was probably my guides, just like, yeah, go connect with her. And so in the session, she was very aware and very intuitive, and so am I. And so as I was laying there receiving, at the same time, I set the intention that any of my intelligence and my gifts would be shared with her through consciousness. So I kind of set that intent. And she said, she commented to me, she goes, it's interesting because she does healings with a lot of people, but she's like, I really feel something with you. Like, it's like a circuit, and like you're sharing with me and I'm sharing with you. And I was like, yes, that's what we're doing. And so it was interesting because she was really helping me ground my energy more, and she could feel intuitively that I was taking her higher in consciousness, and that we were both helping each other in something we needed. But it was like a circuit, like a loop of consciousness helping both the giver and the receiver. And I feel like when I teach trainings, healing trainings, and I lead workshops and things on what I'm doing as a healer, that is one of the most important ingredients, I feel, is to realize when you're, you know, whether you're a healer or the one receiving, and really the true healer is the one healing self. But when we're an assistant, let's say a facilitator to others, it's really that loop that we're creating with source, higher source energy, moving through us, moving to the one we're assisting. But we should always know that it's also coming back to ourselves. And if not, these are the healers that a lot of times I'm helping to help them to remember, because they're the healers that are giving it all away, and they feel really drained and fatigued, and they start to get sicknesses from their clients. They're like, it's like they're a sponge taking on their pain, their problems. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Yeah. Is there a question, Amnon?
Yes, there is a question.
Okay, what's the question?
Pegasus is asking, could the ego ever be so intertwined intertwined with the body that the body would not give an accurate answer from kinesiology.
Yes.
I would say the ego